So I suffered through the Wednesday night matchup of the Detroit Pistons and the Houston Rockets. It was a really tough one to watch, but I wanted to get the chance to watch both Cade, Cunningham, and Jalen Green kind of square off. I'm recording this on Friday, so if they have big nights over the weekend, don't hold that against me. But neither really, made me feel very strongly about either in that game. Neither really lit the world on fire, nor have they been here to start the season. Jalen Green, kind of just the shooting efficiency stuff isn't as good as you would like. I don't think that's all his fault. I mean, he does take some really bad shots, but he sort of has to just on a team that doesn't really have a go-to shot maker or really even a point guard to speak of. They're kind of doing the Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green thing for their point guard. And then DJ Augustine is like one of the only ones on the roster, withholding John Wall just because he's not playing. And then it doesn't even look like they play Augustine that much. It looked like he played a little bit in the Dallas game, like very, very early on to this season, but I didn't see him at all in that Detroit game. It's a weird team. Like they've got Christian Wood out there just balling out because he has to. It's obviously not amounting to much wins or many wins. Both teams were fighting for their first or for their second win of the season during that game. Daniel Tice is kind of hilarious on the Rockets just because he sees himself as a lot better than he actually is, and he just starts firing away these random three-point shots. I hope they can find new homes for both him and Christian Wood. Just, I would like to see them on more competitive teams, and this Houston thing is years away from being, a contending team or even like making any noise at all. The one positive I will say, I do like Green and Kevin Porter Jr. like individually as players. They're still young, so like the decision-making stuff is going to come with time. And I really like how hard they play. Like they've got a lot of young guys that play really hard. Jae'Sean Tate is like an excellent hustle guy. I could see him settling into like a, seventh or eighth guy in a rotation on like a title contending team, like when it's all said and done for him. And then they play really hard for Steven Silas, the coach there. I hope he gets a chance to kind of see this thing through and turn it around because he's due. Like just the fact that they're playing with like really good effort each and every night and being competitive in games and not just getting, just wiped out night after night is really encouraging. On the Detroit side, that was my first Detroit game I watched all year. So I don't really have a ton to say about them. Cade, shooting wise, it's been rough to start. Looks like he's still trying to get like his sea legs under him after that injury. So not super surprising. Some of the playmaking stuff, though, in that Rockets game does leave me a bit concerned, just because it looked rough at times, or he was off the mark on passes late, forcing things, all stuff that younger players do. So nothing too like alarming where it's like this guy definitely isn't going to work out, but neither are really lighting the world on fire. And that kind of got me thinking, I started thinking like how many actual, we always think of the number one and number two pick as being, really good prospects, but how many times throughout history has that actually been the case? And it's surprisingly little. I went back through like the last 40 NBA drafts, not including this one because it's too early to tell. And then even with the Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, I didn't really look at them too hard. It's way too early to tell which one of them is going to be awesome and which one maybe not so much. I would lean towards Edwards being really good and Wiseman not so much, but it's still too early to tell in their careers. Same thing with Zion and Morant. Certainly if Zion can't get healthy, which I'll talk about here in the next video, obviously Morant has been awesome. So it looked like that may be the case here. So 2018, we had DeAndre Ayton and Marvin Bagley. It's pretty clear which one is awesome and which one isn't. And then there were some hilarious ones in here. Like I completely forgot. Like we have, going way back, obviously Hakeem Olajuwon, Sam Bowie. That's a really funny one that stuck out. Kenyon Martin, Stromile Swift, also kind of hilarious. A little bit less funny on this one. well, definitely a lot less funny. But Yao Ming and Jay Williams, Jay Williams had that tragic motorcycle accident that kind of cut his career short. He was just never the same after that. Kind of couldn't get back on the court. LeBron and Darko Milicic, that's another funny one that stuck out. Kind of, and this 2006 was when I really realized like this is actually a thing. Like Andrea Bargnani and LaMarcus Aldridge. Like that one. I forgot all about Andrea Bargnani, but yeah, he definitely holds through to this archetype. We had Derrick Rose, Michael Beasley, 2008, Greg Oden, Kevin Durant, 2007. I think Oden's career, not necessarily his doing, like just bad injury luck with him. I think he looked really good when he was out there, but he just couldn't stay out there and just kind of fell apart. 2009, Blake Griffin, Hasheem Thabeet. Like that was a really funny one. John Wall, Evan Turner, 2010, Kyrie Irving, Derek Williams, 2011, Anthony Davis, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, 2012. I could really only, in the 40 years that I looked at this, I could really only point to 11 of the drafts where both players I would consider successful or both good. And I kind of stretched that. Like it could easily be less. I was like, did both players make an all-star team or an all-NBA? And that was what I considered like, oh, well, both guys were good. Kind of the questionable ones on that list. I think Ben Simmons and Brandon Ingram being like a successful 1 and 2 pick. I think that's questionable at this point, but I included them on there. Danny Manning and Rick Smits. They definitely, at least in Manning's case, did not live up to what people expected him to be. Smits was solid, but both made a single all-star game, so I'm not exactly like jumping up and down about their pairing. Then there were some that were, both players were, or one player was really solid, but maybe not quite as good as the other one. Like Cat and D'Angelo Russell, Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell. I think Towns is obviously a lot better than Russell. Glenn Robinson, Jason Kidd, kind of the same thing. Jason Kidd, obviously much better. Yeah, and then, Isaiah Thomas, Mark Aguirre, both really good players. Isaiah Thomas, much better. Gary Payton, Derek Coleman, same thing. So even amongst those, those were not, or, even amongst those 11 that I found that were successful, some of those are really questionable as to whether both players were awesome. Yeah, and then really only 6 drafts I found where both players were kind of just not really that great. Andrew Wiggins, Jabari Parker. I considered Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball on that list. Michael Olowokandi and Mike Bibby. I thought that one was really funny. Yeah, so there were some drafts where neither player worked out, but for the most part, one team, typically the team with the number 1 pick, but in some cases the team with the number 2 pick, we're getting a really awesome player, and then not so much with the other pick. And the 2 strongest cases. So then I was like, well, who is the best number 1 and number 2 pick, in the last 40 years? And this kind of really illustrates why we need to pump the brakes a little bit on the Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green thing, and why we shouldn't expect both of them to be all-star level players, just because history doesn't show us that that's usually the case. So there was really only 2 that stood out amongst the 11 quote unquote successful pairs. Allen Iverson, Marcus Camby in the 96 draft. Iverson, obviously, most people are going to know about him. MVP, led that Philly team to the finals. He was an 11-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA, Hall of Fame career without a doubt. Camby is kind of a little bit more of a low-key, really good player. Didn't make any all-star teams, so I guess technically he wouldn't fit the mold for what I was deeming like a successful number 1 and number 2 pick. But he was a defensive player of the year, 4-time all defensive team, including 2 firsts, 2 seconds. So, he was an all-time defensive player. And, really, really good, really solid center for a very, very long time. That was the first pairing I looked at, but there was really one that stood out amongst the rest. And this is kind of what you would expect to see from a number 1 and number 2 draft selection. It was Shaq and Alonzo Mourning in 1992. What can we really say about Shaq? He's arguably top 10 player of all time. I think I would probably have him in there. MVP, 4-time champ, 3 times final MVP, 15-time All-Star, including 14 All-NBAs. 8 of those were first team. And then 3 all-defensive teams, all second teams. Alonzo Mourning, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 7-time All-Star. So, obviously all-time defensive player. He had some health issues that kind of hampered his career towards the back half of it. But, he was a 1-time champ as well. They were like by far the most successful number 1 and number 2 pick. So to say that like Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green are both going to have all-star level careers, I just don't see that being the case. Just historically, there's just not a lot of context for that. I think the worst case scenario for Jalen Green, who I've seen play a lot more so far this season, would be like a J.R. Smith. Like if he just never gets the shot selection thing figured out, he's instant offense off of the bench on some just atrocious shots, but he can get hot. So I'm not saying he's going to be out of the league in a couple of years or playing in China or anything like that. But I mean, if things go really badly for him and he doesn't develop at all, you're talking to like a 6th or 7th guy off the bench, instant offense type dude, still a good career. Cade, I don't really have as much of a comp for, like, as far as like a really low ceiling, maybe a little bit Lonzo Ball. I think would be like the lowest, maybe with not with the defensive stuff, just like a solid point guard option off the bench, Sean Livingston, something like that. That would be like the floor for him. But I still think it's way too early to kind of indict either of them on their play, but neither have lit the world on fire, in my opinion. I guess if I had to pick one to be like really good, at least so far, it'd be Jalen Green, but he's played more games, so it's really hard to say. I hope both of them end up being, all-stars year after year, but I just don't see it happening just historically.